Hello everyone, welcome to the sixth Swift tutorial. In this tutorial, we will talk about UISlider, how to add it to the view and how to use it. And we will have some review for IB outlet and IB action. And at the end, we will talk about important subject, which is if-let concept. And so make sure that you watch till the end. Okay, here is the final app that you're gonna see at the end of this tutorial. So if you specify a bill amount here, for example, $100 bills, and you will specify the percentage that you want to spend, and when you change the slider, it will calculate the tip amount and the total amount that you have to calculate. Also, you have this calculate button that if you want to use calculate button instead of slider, you can use it. If I put, for example, $200 and then calculate, it will change the value. So let's create it. Okay, let's create our app. We create a new Xcode project, single view. I cheated. The name would be as Swift, and then tip calculator, and the same directory as other things are there. And here is our view controller. Now we want to add the view elements. So what do we have for the tip calculator? We have, of course, some label. We drag it from the palette. Using the blue guideline, we call it bill amount. And then I have to adjust it. Then we have a text field to input the bill amount. And we can just drag it to have the whole view. And next we have tip percentage. It's another label. We call it tip percentage, and initial percentage would be 15%. Then let's just move it. And then we have a slider. In order to select the percentage, we use this, and we have a button to calculate. I can say calculate total or tip. Just call it calculate. And then we have the result, of course. And tip amount, it will calculate for us the tip amount and also the total. Okay, so if I want to add the constraints, I would say we will have a whole new session for doing that. So if you don't understand it here, just don't worry. We will have just separate session for adding the constraints. Very advanced. We had one for Objective-C. We will have one for Swift. It would be the same, but this time it would be more advanced. So bear with me if you don't understand these things. You will learn it very easily based on my approach to the auto layout, and it was very hard at first to understand, but once you get the logic, it would be I have to add another constraint. Once you get it, it would be really easy to implement. Like, you do it one after another, and that's it. So as you can see, I want to be horizontally center, and also I need another constraint for having the y factor constraint, and this one would be the same. Center horizontally, and it needs another constraint for height, and the last one just control drag center horizontally, and it needs a height factor. So it's right now all of the constraints are met. So let's create the logic. We have to connect all of our view controller elements to the class. So for the dynamic parts, let's just get rid of everything that we have here. I will just put this one, control drag it to the view. That's how we connect elements. And we call it build amount filled. And it creates the outlet for us in order to get the percentage that user inputs. Then we have a label that we need to change whenever user changes the slider. So we say tip percentage label, and that's it. And we have a slider. So this slider should have an action basically. It's not an outlet for us because we want an action. We need to do something when they change the slider. We want to change the percentage, so it needs an action. Instead of outlet, it needs an action. So I would say tip percentage slider. Oh no, if it was an outlet we would call it like this, but right now because it's action we say slider changed. Then you will create IB action instead of IB outlet. Then we need the same thing for our button. And this is also action because user press the button and they need to get the answer. So we say calculate pressed. And these two are outlet because we just change it based on the calculation. So this one was tip amount label, and the other one is total label. So that's it. Let's create it. Okay, the first thing that we want to do is to change the label once they change the value of the slider. The things that we need to do for setting the minimum and maximum for the slider is if you click on it and go into Attribute Inspector, you will see a min and max here. You can do it programmatically, but if it's something fixed, you can just do it here. You can say minimum is 1 and max we want to get a tip, it would be 25%. And what is the initial value? You can just say I want it to be on 15. So in order to be in the middle, I would change the max to 30, so the slider would be in the middle. So right now the min and max is set and the current value is 15, so it's matched with our label. So let's just see how we can change it. If we created the action for this slider, if I go to the code, and let me make the code a little bit bigger. This is how you can make the code font size, bigger by clicking and selecting all of the fonts here, and then select what you just saw. And if you remember, we created the IB action for slider changed, and what we have to do, we have to update the label. Which label? And the tip percentage label. What should we set? So we can say tip percentage label dot text, and it returns an optional because this could be nil, but we have to unwrap it, and we can say it's equal to what? And we can say the slider. So slider value is a sender basically. So sender dot value. But this sender dot value returns int. So it's not compatible. It returns float, sorry. And so it's not compatible with the string type that it expects. So we have to convert it. We can say float. Sorry. We have to convert it to string. So this will returns the value. So let's just test it. We have to add this part as well, tip percentage as well, but for now we just test it without that and see what we get. Okay, here's the app up and running, and as soon as I change it, of course, it will just show the percentage, and that's the thing that I said we have to add. But there is another problem with it, and it shows the decimal place. So let's fix these two issues. For changing the decimal place, removing it, we need to change the float that it returns float. So we need to change it to int. So how do we convert it to int? The same way that we did for string. We wanted to change the float to string. We just wrap it with string. So now we have to change it first to int. So I would say int, and inside of this it will convert the float first to int, and then convert the int into string. So that's how we do it. Then let's fix the first part, which was adding the percentage amount. So if I want to see, what was it? Yeah, it says percentage tip percentage. Yeah, tip percentage, and after the tip percentage we have percentage sign. So all you have to do in order to concatenate strings, just put plus. So now if I run it, of course, it will get rid of the zeros after decimal place, and also it adds the tip percentage before the amount. So let's see if it actually does. So as you can see, it's working fine. Now the next thing that we're going to do is to calculate. So it should get the value of percentage and also the value of this field and do the calculation and give us the tip amount. So one thing that we missed was creating the outlet for the slider. We just added the action for it, but we need the outlet for it. So I will explain why we need the outlet. And so let's just create an outlet for it. Slider value or slider, that's it, or tip slider. So why do we need the outlet for it? It's because when we want to calculate it here, we need to get the tip slider, which I missed the I, but I cannot change it here. I have to reconnect it, but let's just use it for it now. Yeah, we need to get the value out of it. If we don't have it, we have to store it somewhere. So I don't want to store it, so I just prefer to create the outlet for it. And then I would say I can say first get the bill amount and multiply it by tip slider value and give me the tip amount. So all of this calculation should go to a function basically called calculate tip. So let's add this function. So it's a func tip calculate tip, and okay, so now what should we do? We should get the bill amount field, the text out of it, and unwrap it because it returns an optional, and it returns a string. So what we want is int, so we need to get the int value out of it. The same way that we did here, we do the same way here, and then we multiply it by the tip amount, and tip amount is tip slider dot value. We get the value out of the slider, and it will give us the tip amount. So it's a tip amount. We can just define a variable for it. Tip amount is equal this. So this is type float. So let's just make this float as well. So it will not give us the error. Let's see what it's. Okay, yeah, float returns optional, so we have to unwrap the float as well. So then we can get the tip amount. And once we get the tip amount, we can update our label. What is our label? This is the tip amount label. So we can say tip amount label dot text, and it's optional, we have to unwrap it, is equal tip amount. But this tip amount is type float. I have to convert it to string, so I would say string, and it will convert it to string for me. I can just save one line of code by just adding this line inside of this parenthesis, but just let's keep it like this and run the application and see when we press this button, it should update only this tip amount, not total. We have not changed the total yet. Okay, one thing we missed was dividing the slider value by 100 because it's percentage and we have to divide it by 100, just the math calculation that I missed some part. So if I put 100 bill, it should give me 15% tip, it should give me $15. So that's right. So now we have to update the total as well. It's very easy. We can just say let total, and it's equal the tip amount that we calculate here plus the float value that we have here. It's the bill plus the tip amount. So then we can update the total label as well. We have total label here, the total label dot text. We unwrap it and put it equal to total, but this total is float, so let's just convert it to string by wrapping it. And basically when we run the app, it should update the tip amount and also total. So if I open it, I put $100 and it shows me the tip amount and also the total. If I change the slider, calculate, it will calculate it based on the tip percentage here. So, but I want to add the functionality that when I change the slider, it changed the tip amount and also the total simultaneously by slider. So all I have to do, I have to put this function that I wrote and add it here. So when I run it again, as soon as the slider changed, this function is called and it will update the labels. So I would say $100 calculate. If I press calculate, it would be the same that if I change the slider. So if you want to remove some decimal places, you can do the same thing that I did for this, and that's it. Okay, one last thing which is really important, and it's basically a topic, and I take this opportunity to show you the issue and then talk about the topic. So for our calculate tip, there's an issue that if user doesn't type anything or type some strings inside of here, it will crash the app. So for example, if I click calculate, you will see the app will crash. And why? And it will stop right here. It's because it wants to get the value out of it and convert it to float. It returns optional, and we unwrap a nil. So, and you know that if you unwrap something nil, it will an exception. So how we should fix it? We have a concept in Swift that it's called if let, and you just let the variable if it has some value. So I add my changes next to the current implementation to show you what exactly we are going to change. So let me paste whatever it needs to be, so you will get what exactly it needs. So let me get some space here, and going up here. So this is our initial implementation that we just demoed, but it needs to change to this. So what I have done here, let me just comment out these so it won't give me error for these. First, I come here and I define a tip amount, the one that we had here. In order to calculate and make sure that we are using if let, I had to separate this part because this part was an issue. So I separated this part and I defined a value, and I called it float. I called it bill amount, and it just calculated this. But instead of just putting let, I put if let. So what it means that it goes to this variable and it looks at the value, and if it returns nil, it will go to the else statement. But if it doesn't return nil, it will go inside of my bracket. So that's why we're using if let. So in order to be safe and it doesn't crash the app if it wants to unwrap it. So basically I separate out this part and put it in a different variable, but we have the same variable for tip amount that we had before. We put it up there because if I have these variables inside of this let, it cannot see it outside of these brackets. So for example, if I remove these two and add var here and var here, and of course in else var here, you will see that I will get some error here because it doesn't know the this is old code. It doesn't know the tip amount here. So that's why I put it outside of the brackets. So I redo the things. So let me just comment this out. And yeah, and inside of the bracket, I did exactly the same that we were doing inside of here. So the tip amount was equal to this value multiplied by this. So I said bill amount, which is this, multiplied by this, and the total is the same. The tip amount multiplied by the bill amount. So instead of this, I can just go ahead and put bill amount. Bill amount. So it would be much simpler and much safe. And if user types something that returns nil, I will set the tip amount and total equals 0. So if I run the app, let me just get rid of these spaces and the old implementation. So if I run the app, it should show me 0 if user doesn't put anything or type some string or something that is not defined for float. So first I would put nothing and it won't crash the app, it just sends 0. And if I put some number, calculate, it will give me the amount. And again, if I put something that it doesn't define for float, it will return 0. So that's how we handled nil and optional. So If you want to unwrap it and you want to be safe, you use if let. This is very common in Swift and you should get used to it.